Welcome. I'm Doug Morgan, and you're listening to Uncommon Sense, where we hunt for the truth in the topics you're not supposed to talk about, Christianity and politics. And welcome back, everyone, to FOMO Friday. Yeah, every week here on the podcast, we bring you FOMO Friday. And what that means is that you're not listening to propaganda media anymore, but you want to know what's going on around the world, and particularly those things. Even if you are listening to propaganda media, you're not hearing a ton of different stories out there that don't fit the liberal narrative, right? So we love to bring you those stories, and some you may have heard about, some maybe you haven't, but we have a lot to get into this week. So let's jump right in. And this first one comes from KGW.com, and it's kind of interesting. It's a little bit of a problem when it comes to AI. An Oregon attorney has been slapped with a $10,000 fine for citing legal quotes that do not exist. Yeah, Salem-based attorney William Giorso was hit with the fine for submitting an open brief with at least 15 fabricated citations and at least 9 quotations that do not exist. So he's citing law that doesn't exist. Oh, man. Quote, the state's response brief pointed out that a number of citations in the opening brief and even quotes in the opening brief that were purportedly from cases don't appear to match any cases that they could find. And frankly, we followed up and we could not find those either, said the appellate judge Scott Shore. Yeah, so the judge did his own work on this, and he's like, yeah, no, I can't find them either. Those fabricated citations, the result of using AI to do legal research for an opening brief. Well, Giorso blamed it on his law clerk using a bad search engine, which they later deleted and all this. But this is what the judge said about that. He says, it couldn't just be a search engine, something produced and wrote the brief that your name is on, correct? Well, of course, the lawyer said yes. So you couldn't get out of it that easy. This is a result of AI hallucinations, when AI mistakenly generates information that isn't backed up by any sources or facts, or as Shore put it, contrived from thin air. That's what the judge said about it. Portland State University computer science professor Bart Massey has been following instances of false AI information appearing in legal documents. Massey says that there is a database that has nearly 1,200 incidences of attorneys citing hallucinatory case law around the world because of AI. Giorso was given a court-imposed $10,000 fine, and this was lower than the minimum, actually, in part because Giorso has reportedly implemented new procedures to prevent this from happening again, and maybe the embarrassment factor too. I don't know. Can you imagine submitting this brief and it cites case law that doesn't exist and quotations that don't exist? Yeah. Well, in the news this week was a big Supreme Court ruling, and this really was quite massive. And I really liked the opinion piece by Ben Shapiro and what he wrote on it. He said, on Tuesday, the Supreme Court ruled in Childs versus Salazar, the basic concept of the Supreme Court ruling was that the state of Colorado was wrong to ban what it called conversion therapy. Yeah, they ruled against that ban. The 2019 Colorado law prohibited licensed mental health professionals from engaging in conversion therapy with patients under 18 years of age. They define conversion therapy to include any practice or treatment that attempts to change an individual's sexual orientation or gender identity. as well as any efforts to change behaviors or gender expressions, or to eliminate or reduce sexual or romantic attractions toward individuals of the same sex. Well, the same law allowed counselors to provide acceptance, support, and understanding for identity exploration and development, and to assist persons undergoing gender transition. So basically, they could go say one way they could support kids as they want to change their sex, but they couldn't say anything if the kid said, no, I don't want to change my sex. So in other words, the Colorado law said that if a kid comes to you with gender confusion, you are not allowed to say boys are boys and girls are girls. Let's help you be more comfortable in your own body. If a boy says I'm a girl, you have to affirm him. And if you don't affirm him, you're engaged in conversion therapy, and you can be prosecuted under the law in the state of Colorado. If a kid comes to you and says, listen, I'm confused about my feelings of sexual attraction, you're not allowed to talk that through and say, you know what? You're 14 years old. A lot of people are confused about sexual attraction at 14 years old. You're being hit by hormones that you've never experienced before, and you really don't have any sort of clear line as to how to live your life. So let's talk this thing through. That might be conversion therapy, because that could be construed as an attempt to change behavior or eliminate or reduce sexual or romantic attraction toward individuals of the same sex. Instead, you're supposed to just give that kid a pride flag and tell him to get out there and march, right? The plaintiff in this case, Kelly Childs, holds a master's degree in clinical mental health and a state counseling license in Colorado. And according to the Supreme Court, Childs doesn't start counseling with any predetermined goals. Instead, she sits down with clients, discusses their goals, and then formulates methods of counseling that will most benefit them, seeking throughout to respect their client's fundamental right of self-determination, matters of sexuality and gender, and those type of things. So the clients sometimes have different agendas, according to the Supreme Court. Some are perfectly happy being gay or lesbian or transgender identifying, and others want to reduce or eliminate unwanted sexual attractions, or change sexual behaviors, or grow in the experience of harmony with their bodies. Well, under Colorado law, those last people are just plumb out of luck. There's nothing they can do, because if you, for example, are a person who has a fetish and you don't want to have that fetish anymore, according to Colorado law, you are not allowed as a therapist to try to change an individual's behaviors regarding sexual or romantic attraction. Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch, who is not a strict textualist when it comes to these matters, wrote the opinion, and his basic opinion is pretty simple. The First Amendment allows therapists to say what they want to say during therapy. The only person who voted in dissent, so this is an 8-1 decision, the only person who voted in dissent was, of course, wait for it, Ketanji Brown Jackson, the dumbest person on the Supreme Court. That's saying something. That's saying a lot, because Sonia Sotomayor is also on the Supreme Court, but I digress. Gorsuch wrote this. He says, consistent with the First Amendment's jealous protections of the individual's rights to think and speak freely, this court has long held that laws regarding speech based on its subject matter or communicative content are presumably unconstitutional. We have recognized as well the even greater dangers associated with regulations that discriminate based on the speaker's point of view. So in other words, The big problem here is that it's not just that Colorado is putting regulations on speech. Those regulations on speech are content dependent. So Colorado says you can say these things that we agree with, but you cannot say these things in which we disagree. Well, Gorsuch continues. He says, while the First Amendment protects many and varied forms of expression, the spoken word is perhaps the quintessential form of protected speech. And that is exactly the kind of expression in which Miss Childs seeks to engage. As a talk therapist, all Miss Childs does is speak with clients. She does not prescribe medication, use medical devices, or employ any physical methods. Consider, too, where the state and dissent's logic leads. Not long ago, many medical experts and organizations, including the American Psychiatric Association, considered homosexuality as a mental disorder. On The View, Colorado and the dissents advance a law adopted during the era prohibiting counselors from engaging in substandard care of affirming their client's homosexuality would have been subject to only rational-based or intermediate scrutiny review, and likely upheld. Today, tomorrow, and forever too. Any professional speech that deviates from current beliefs about the safety and efficacy of various mental treatments could be silenced with relative ease. So, in other words, this is what he's saying. The court is saying, if Colorado is suggesting that a state can determine what is the best course of care with regard to opinions on open matters of gender and sexuality, and then mandate that sort of stuff on subject matter basis, that is a violation of free speech. The court goes out of its way to really slap Jackson. I think this was interesting. That last statement, today, tomorrow, and forever too. Any professional speech that deviates from current beliefs about the safety and efficacy of various medical treatments could be silenced with relative ease, is followed by this. It is a consequence Colorado freely acknowledges, and one the dissent embraces. So the opinion then cites Buck versus Bell. That is a scathing rebuttal to Jackson, because Buck versus Bell was the case that suggested that you had the ability under the law to sexually sterilize inmates of institutions, because that was the prevailing science of the time. Jackson has said that she liked that law. Jackson said in the Childs case that Colorado was simply, quote, restricting a dangerous therapy modality, unquote, adding that the court's opinion was unprincipled and unworkable. She followed with a long statement about how wonderful the gender orientation of the left-wing philosophy is and that type of stuff. Ketanji Brown Jackson's dissent is a reminder that if the left had complete control over the mechanisms of government, it would simply regulate into law all of the most specious and idiotic views about science. And without President Trump as president, we were super close to that world, because President Trump is responsible for several selections on that Supreme Court. And in this case, Elena Kagan and Sonia Sotomayor ruled with the majority. But if there were a bunch of Democratic appointees on the court, this is how it would have gone differently if there had been that. If there had not been the Trump appointees on there, who are constitutionalists, who look at things from a what used to be common sense point of view, at least in my opinion. Well, let's move to the border, our northern border, if we can. This from the Canadian Press, and they report 2 Alberta separatists say their group has collected enough signatures from citizens to trigger a referendum on the province separating from Canada. We might have a new neighbor. yeah, a new country up there. Mitch Sylvester said that the group named Stay Free Alberta has collected more than the approximate 178,000 required signatures. He also said volunteers who have been keeping tally as the signatures come in are expecting that number to grow. Quote, we have more than the buffer that's required if Elections Alberta refuse signatures as well. So he said in a phone interview on Tuesday that even if the government throws out some of the signatures, they have a buffer. They still have another month to go before they must deliver the names to Elections Alberta for verification. But Jeffrey Rath, the general counsel of the group, said they want to announce their success right now, that they've actually already done it, and they're just getting a bigger and bigger buffer. He also said the name gatherers have been getting harassed in person and online, with one getting spit on, actually. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith has said that she will move forward with a province-wide referendum if the required number of signatures are gathered and verified. So we'll keep an eye on that, because obviously, if they separate from Canada, I mean, obviously it's been developing for a very long time. I mean, you can think back to a number of different things where the government has been cracking down. The Canadian government has been cracking down on people and their free speech. I think if you remember the truckers up there when they had their walkout, the government actually came in and froze their bank accounts and did all kinds of stuff. I mean, we've been reporting on so much when it because they've gone to a socialist government, and when that happens, people are just not going to be happy. So anyway, we'll keep an eye on what Alberta does. Well, this is something that's a little bit unsettling, I guess. Maybe this is how zombies are made. I don't know. William Morgan, no relation that I know of, wrote this in the unilad.com. He says, mankind may one day satisfy its organ donation and medical research needs with the use of lab-grown headless human bodies if one group of scientists gets their way. Researchers at R3 Bio are attempting to speed up the transition away from the use of animals in laboratories for testing breakthrough medicines and cosmetics and things like that, with the innovation of non-sentient organ sacs, as they want to call them. The billionaire-funded biotech firm is in the process of creating the, as they put it, complete organ system of animals commonly used in testing. They're already seeing success with headless mouse technology. Next is primates. That's what they're going to next. Importantly, for R3's end goal of growing a headless human body, these sacs of organs all lack a brain, and therefore lack the troublesome consciousness and pain processing powers that make testing and organ harvesting unethical in the first place. Though the scientists don't like when you call them brainless, their sacs are going to be. Well, R3 CEO and co-founder Alice Gilman has said she does not like this word for the sacs of organs her team is developing, as by design they aren't really missing anything at all, even if her lab is full of headless mice. Speaking to Wired, she said, it's not missing anything because we design it to only have the things we want. Well, this might all seem a bit science fiction, especially with the team referring to these lab-made living creatures as bodyoids. They call them bodyoids. The success of their early trials developing the technology to make mouseoids has seen them secure major outside investments. So they have seen some success here. One of their biggest backers, Boyang Wang, CEO of investment fund Immortal Dragons, said, quote, "We think replacement is probably better than repair when it comes to treat diseases or regulating the aging process in the human body. Quote, if we can create a non-sentient headless bodyoid for a human being, that will be a great source of organs." Well, R3 CEO Gilman told Wired that they have developed these systems to start making headless mice, but are yet to implement the technology. Though once they do, the company's aim is to move into primate and remove around 60,000 of our closest relatives from the labs and cages of scientific research firms around the world. Quote, the benefit of using models that are more ethical and are exclusively organ systems should be that testing can be meaningfully more scalpable. This is what Gilman said. He said, and this is true for the humanoids too. Not only do the scientists hope that these lab-grown headless humans would solve the problems of organ donation, but they also hope that their innovation would make testing at large more accurate, as it would be able to skip the animal-based study stage and go straight to applying human organ sacs with experimental drugs. Gilman wrote in a blog about the new technology that, quote, the human body is not a collection of parts, it's a system. We can't keep studying diseases in pieces and hoping the result will scale. Whether we're testing new drugs, mapping rare disorders, or training AI models, the biology we use needs to reflect the biology we live with. Well, she went on to explain how the technology her company is developing needed to be scaled up to become a new nationwide model for testing, adding, that means funding it like a public good, validating it like a regulatory standard, and building it with the urgency of a moonshot. So obviously they're begging for more money, but yeah, kind of weird. I don't know what I think about that yet. I don't really know what I think about that one, but maybe you do. But moving on, Donald Trump in the news. And one of them here is kind of interesting. President Donald Trump signed an executive order on Tuesday afternoon aimed at securing mail-in voting and ensuring that only eligible voters are allowed to cast ballots in federal elections. This is interesting to myself just personally because I live in a state where it's mail-in only. The state to our south, mail-in only. And it's just been a horrendous system. It's really bad. So, but the Daily Wire reports that while states are responsible for the election process, including their mail-in voting systems, Trump's order seeks to use the power of the federal government to verify that mail-in ballots are only sent to American citizens who are eligible to vote. The order, which was first reported by the Daily Caller, required the Department of Homeland Security to create a list of American voters and tasks the United States Postal Service will ensure that absentee ballots are only sent to people on the list. Quote, the right to vote in federal elections is reserved exclusively for citizens of the United States under the Constitution and the federal law. This is what the Trump's order states. He says federal statutes explicitly prohibit non-citizens from registering to vote or voting in federal elections and impose criminal penalties for violations. Now, under the order, The federal data on eligible voters would be shared with state election officials who would see who is on the list of eligible voters in their jurisdictions. States would receive the list of confirmed voters no fewer than 60 days before each federal election, and the order stipulates and requires that absentee ballots are placed into envelopes that have specific barcodes to make them easy to track. In the order, Trump instructs the Attorney General to prosecute state and local officials and any public or private entities that issue ballots to ineligible voters. Immediately after signing the order, the president acknowledges that a federal judge would likely challenge his action. that would be a shocker, right? You may find a rogue judge. You have a lot of rogue judges, very bad people, very bad judges. But that's the only way that can be changed, and hopefully will win on appeal. If it is, Trump said, I don't see how anybody can challenge it. Trump is attempting to address concerns about mail-in voting through executive action as the Republican-led Senate sits on the Save America Act, legislation pushed by Trump that would impose more restrictions on mail-in voting and require voters to provide ID and proof of citizenship when they register to vote. Trump has pressed Republicans to pass that SAVE Act, but the bill would have to overcome the 60-vote filibuster threshold that Democrats are relying on to block the voter ID legislation. Now, Trump has argued that the Save America Act is vital to maintain trust in U.S. elections, and his push for stronger voter ID and mail-in ballot laws comes just months before the important 2026 midterm elections. Democrats have already condemned Trump's order as unconstitutional and argue that the president's actions would disenfranchise voters. You've heard that one before, right? Democrats are also united in their opposition to the Save America Act, with the party claiming that stricter voter ID and citizenship requirements would prevent tens of millions of people from voting. They're pretty scared about that one. I've had a number of conversations about the SAVE Act and things. We've talked about it here on the podcast. They're pretty freaked out over that, but it's what is needed. Well, another big story that happened this week is Pam Bondi finally was fired from her job as AG. The Daily Mail comes out with this one. It says Pam Bondi finally broke her silence after being fired by Donald Trump in a late-night White House showdown. Bondi said that she would be working to transition the Attorney General office over the next month to help her deputy Todd Blanche before moving to an unspecified job in the private sector. Trump informed the AG late the other night, shortly before his Iran speech, that she would soon be leaving the Justice Department, according to a senior administration source. Bondi, who's 60, actually, pleaded with the president to keep her job, begging him to give her one more time, is what the senior administration source told the Daily Mail. Quote, she was unhappy and tried to change his mind. Trump's reasoning for the sudden dismissal comes in part because the president believes Bondi tipped off Eric Swalwell about the FBI's efforts to release investigative documents related to his relationship with the alleged Chinese spy, Fang Fang. The FBI was preparing a cache of documents on Swalwell's relationship with Christine Fang, or Fang Fang as she's known, better known for. She's intervening in those matters. The White House wasn't pleased. She was intervening due to her personal friendship with Swalwell, is what a source added. And it is unclear why Bondi would have intervened, but it is believed that Bondi and Swalwell have a friendly relationship. Swalwell is one of the leading candidates, of course, for the California gubernatorial race as a Democrat. And so it would be really interesting to see if that was really the straw that broke the camel's back. Well, lastly, we're coming right up on Easter this weekend, and so I had kind of an interesting story here coming out of England, the UK, and this comes from the Western Standard. Says Buckingham Palace has confirmed that King Charles III will not, and I repeat, will not be issuing an Easter message this year. This marks a difference from last year when His Majesty issued a message praising Islam and Judaism on Maundy Thursday. The decision to not release a formal message has caused an uproar among Christians, of course, especially in the wake of His Majesty issuing a Ramadan message on Shrove Tuesday in February, saying, quote, wishing all Muslims in the UK, the Commonwealth, and around the world a blessed and peaceful Ramadan. Yeah, well, of course, Ramadan is the holiest month in the Islamic calendar, marked by increased prayer and fasting from dawn to sunset. Of course, there's a lot of Muslims in the UK, in Western Europe in general now because of their immigration policies, causing a lot of issues. Political commentator Noah Berg, he questioned the double standard of King Charles being, quote, more than happy to pour his heart and soul into Islam during Ramadan, but not issuing a message addressing Christians and their faith. I can't argue with that. Why would you not? Especially over there where the king is supposed to be the head of the church over there. And you're not going to issue a statement, not even one little statement on Easter, but you did for Ramadan. Kind of shows you how things have gone sideways over in England. So anyway, would love to hear what you think on it, and maybe even what your Easter plans are. You can always do that at uncommonsensepodcast.com. Thank you very much for listening.
This podcast is a production of Morganite Communications.